Welcome back to another episode of Tea After Midnight. Just a little series where we have some tea to keep it nice and classy, but I also tell you scary stories. Tonight's story is going to be a little bit different because it actually comes from somebody who I'm collaborating with. Her name is Riley, and she is the host of Ghosts in the Garden. I sent one of my stories to Riley, and she read it over on her page, and tonight I get the pleasure of reading her story here on Tea After Midnight. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story comes from Riley. When I was a teenager, I fell in love with everything paranormal. My dream became to be a professional paranormal investigator. I now work IT, but a girl can dream. I was so committed, I convinced my mom to drive out of state to an event to meet the Ghost Adventures crew, and I'll include a photo. This story starts in Texas when I was 14. My best friend Sammy was equally as interested in ghosts as I was. So when we heard a rumor that a man down the street had passed away in a traumatic way, we were instantly interested. The house was vacant and had been vacant for only a week since the man's passing. She was at my house after school one afternoon, so we headed down the street to the house. The house was a normal suburban house with a tall iron fence around it, matching all the fences in our subdivision. We checked to be sure no one was watching and quickly slipped through the gate, latching it behind us to not raise suspicion. Walking up to the house, we both felt an eerie feeling as if we were being watched, but chalked this up to nerves about being somewhere we shouldn't be. Fueled by all the ghost hunting shows I watched, I marched right up to the house and announced, "If anyone is here and doesn't want us to be, give us a sign." It was cheesy, but hey, I was 14. A silence followed, and a few seconds later we heard a creak. Sammy turned and gasped as the iron gate swung open, stopping perfectly at 90 degrees. Knowing we'd latched it before walking up, she ran as fast as she could out of the gate, begging me to follow. I stood there stunned that something had actually happened. And of course I didn't leave. I kept poking around and trying to get another reaction, but nothing else happened. This was only the beginning. That night, laying in bed reading, I had completely forgotten about this. I set my book down, turned out the light, and as I started to get comfortable in bed, I heard the bushes outside my window moving. It sounded like someone was stepping into them from the front sidewalk. I got very still, fearing that someone was trying to break into my room. The bushes suddenly stopped, and I heard a very clear tap, tap, tap on the inside, like someone knocking to get my attention. I was frozen in fear, listening for the person to walk away, but the bushes never rustled again. After a few minutes, I was starting to relax, assuming I'd just made it up in my mind, when I heard someone breathing. It was heavy, ragged breaths right next to my bed. I panicked, flipped my lamp back on, assuming an intruder had gotten in, only to see nothing. My room was completely untouched. Then I remembered what happened earlier that day. I think this was the moment I realized I may have aggravated a spirit into following me back to my house. This isn't where the story ends. The breathing continued every night for a couple of weeks until we abruptly moved to Utah. I was so excited to get away from whatever I brought home and start a new chapter in life. A couple of weeks passed as we settled in. I got the teenager's dream room in our finished basement while my family had all their rooms on the second floor. I could stay up as late as I wanted without my parents knowing. Every night I sat on the couch outside my room to chat with Danny on the phone, as my room had no cell signal. After a few weeks of this nightly ritual, I started to feel weird. The hair on my neck would stand up and I'd feel as if someone was watching me while chatting on the phone. And every time I looked around the basement, no one was there. I brushed it off again as my nerves, considering I was down in the basement alone. One morning, my alarm had went off for school, and I had turned on my light to start waking up. My door started shaking on its hinges as if someone was holding the handle on the other side and pulling it back and forth as hard as they could. I jumped, then was immediately irritated that my little brother would try to scare me. I hopped out of bed, marched to the door, and flung it open, ready to berate him, but no one was there. Not outside my door, and not anywhere in the open basement. I stood there trying to figure out how he'd gotten away without me seeing him. Puzzled, I continued my morning routine and forgot about this. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I finally realized I hadn't escaped the spirit. I opened my bedroom door to turn off the basement lights and get some rest when I saw my shadow cast in a strange way across the room. It was cast standing straight up, but I couldn't piece together how the light was working to make it. Then it started walking. I stood perplexed as it walked across the wall, then disappeared right before it got to the corner. I looked down and saw my shadow was at my feet, cast by the light above me. I slammed my door and dove into bed, too scared to turn out the lights. Once a week, every morning, my door would shake violently. No one was ever on the other side. I saw shadows moving when I was still, and I heard a voice of a man outside my room in the hallway constantly. Everything kept escalating more and more until one day it stopped. Not a single strange feeling, no voices, and no shadows. The silence almost scared me more, but the silence continued for months. Sammy came to visit one fall, and we were thrilled to be reunited after almost a year apart. I had one more day of school before break, and my mom took my brother and me to school. This part was told to me by Sammy when I got home. She was in my bathroom in the basement getting ready when she heard someone pounding on the door. She opened it, assuming my mom needed something urgent, to find no one standing there. Not only that, but no one was home at all. To this day, this was the final encounter of this spirit. I don't know where he went or why he stuck around so long just to suddenly disappear. And I don't know why Sammy was the last one to hear from him. I hope he's at peace, and I'm thankful for the peace myself. If anyone has any insight, I'd love to hear it. Well, Riley, I can definitely agree with you on the growing up with the paranormal investigator shows and watching those. I still love watching those, and I still love going on ghost hunts to this day. But I definitely think that day that you went over to that man's house, I really feel like you brought something home with you. Now, I do want to say I'm very thankful that it didn't physically hurt you in any way, but mentally, I mean, I would have been terrified, especially as a 14-year-old, to experience something like that. That's terrifying. The creepiest part about your story, girl, I want to say, is when you're standing there, you see your shadow on the wall, but then it starts moving and you're not moving. That gives me chills. That freaks me out so bad. But I am so glad that you're not experiencing anything anymore. I love that for you. So maybe he did just move on, and I do hope he's at peace as well, like you said. And I'm glad that you have peace yourself. But Riley, thank you so much for collaborating with me. This was truly so fun. I've loved getting to know you. And guys, if you are watching this, if you don't know who Riley is, who hosts Ghosts in the Garden, this is her page right here. Go check her out. You guys will love her energy, love her stories. She is so sweet, and I'm so thankful that I've gotten to meet her. I do want to say that hopefully one day we can get together and do an actual episode in person together, but there's about an 11-hour drive between us, so hopefully one day soon we can do that for you guys. But if you would, just go over there, show her a lot of love, give her a follow. You guys will love her content just as much as I do. And to you guys, I do want to say I'm so sorry for the little break I took. I had a head cold, and I was fighting for my life, but we are good now. I still have a little bit of congestion, but we're pretty much over it, so I'm so glad to be back. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them. You can email me at the email on the screen or the email in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have the best night. I love you so much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
I got an email from a pretty big influencer who said that a spirit tried to her. Now, she wants to remain anonymous, so we're going to call her Shelly. This story is crazy. Actually, she starts it off by saying that if she had a weaker heart when this happened, she wouldn't have survived it. A little background on Shelly. She is 50 years old, and she has been able to see spirits ever since she was a little girl, but at 13 years old, this all changed. So when Shelly is 13 years old, she goes over to a friend's house, and she's having a sleepover. They do whatever they're doing during the day, and they fall asleep. Now, in the middle of the night, Shelly wakes up because she feels something inches from her face. Now, Shelly opens her eyes to see this old woman leaning over her and looking at her straight in her face. Now, she thought that it was her friend's grandmother at first, except for the only problem is that this older woman had this expression of pure hatred on her face. And she's just breathing like really heavily. It's very uncomfortable for her because she can feel it in her face. Now, at this point, she still thinks that it's her friend's grandmother. So the next day she asks her friend, what was your crazy grandmother doing directly in my face last night? And her friend just looks at her confused and she's like, my grandmother doesn't live here, only my parents do. Then her friend just casually mentions that an older woman had actually deleted herself in the attic years before. So she's really freaked out by this. She said that later on that day, as her and her friend are still hanging out, she just keeps hearing this boom, 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 boom in the attic. Like someone is just running back and forth up in the attic. She said that this experience terrified her so badly that she made a conscious decision to shut down her abilities. So from that point forward, she refused to see spirits directly. If she sees them now, she only sees them in her mind's eye. But it does not end there. So fast forward to her 30s, and she gets invited to present at a conference in McAllen, Idaho. Now, the conference manager booked her into what we're going to call the Lakeside Hotel. So she arrives at the conference at around 8 p.m. in the evening. She said that this place was absolutely beautiful. It was freshly renovated, it was comfortable, and there was even a hot tub on the deck. She said she remembers looking at the hot tub and thinking how perfect it would be to use it after teaching all weekend. She would never get to use that hot tub. Now, she said that nothing at all felt creepy about the room when she very first walked in. So around 9 p.m., she's sitting on the bed, fully dressed, scrolling through social media. She wants to emphasize that she was not lying down, drifting off to sleep, or even tired. Now, before we go on, it's important to note that the room laid out like this. There was a bed that sat against the far wall. At the foot of the bed was a short hallway leading to 2 bathroom doors. The bathroom on the right contained the toilet and sink. The bathroom on the left had the hot tub and another sink. Now, all the lights are off at this point. She's scrolling on her phone when, boom, the bathroom with the bathtub light just flicks on. Now, she remembers looking up and thinking, that's strange, but she's also an extremely logical person. Even with her past experiences, she always tries to debunk something before just assuming that it's paranormal. So her first thought is, old house, new renovation, probably faulty wiring. So she walks into the bathroom to see what kind of light switch there is, and it's like a manual light switch, and it's in the on position. Now, this gives her pause. Still, she tells herself maybe it didn't fully engage before and somehow slipped, so she doesn't want to freak herself out, so she just decided to ignore it. So since she needed to relax before bed anyway, she starts to run a bath. Well, while she's standing there, she just happens to glance at the other hallway towards the other bathroom. Now, the bright light behind her should have illuminated that whole side of the room. The toilet was only a few feet inside the doorway, and she did not see the toilet. She saw nothing. She didn't see darkness. It was darker than darkness. She said that it looked like someone hung a black velvet sheet across the whole doorway. Now, immediately she's thinking, this is physically impossible. She said for the first time she thought like maybe something is there, but she still tried to talk herself out of it. So she finishes her bath, she gets ready for bed, and she climbs onto it. And she puts herself in a position where she is sitting upright with her phone. Now, she's just sitting there scrolling through her phone, but to the left of her bed was her purse, a notebook, several books for the conference, lip gloss, and a few other personal items. When suddenly she hears this shoo, shoo. She said it sounded like footsteps with the unmistakable swooshing sound of someone wearing heavy corduroy pants. She said that the sound came from the toilet bathroom and it was walking directly towards her. Every hair on her body stood up and she just freezes. The footsteps came to the left of her bed, and then she watched every single thing sitting beside her sliding out of the way. Not all together, one by one. Exactly the way someone would clear a space before sitting down. And then something sits on the bed. Hard, like the mattress compressed deeply. She then hears the bed frame creak, and she sees the indentation go down so far that it looked like that of a man who weighed about 175 pounds or more. That was the moment when true terror hit her, and she just curls up into a ball. She then turns to her right side, so her back is now facing away from whatever is there. Over and over, she just starts whispering, "Go away, you are not welcome here. You need to leave." And she just keeps repeating it, hoping and praying that whatever this is will leave. And then it just starts pushing down. She said she just completely panics because her first thought isn't ghosts, it's, oh my God, there's a man in this room. Someone is somehow messing with me. She said though, whenever she travels, she checks every nook and cranny, in the bathroom, under the bed, in the corners, under tables, everything. And she knew that she had done this as a woman traveling alone this time too. But she also wasn't sure. Did she check under the bed, the hot tub, the deck door? But nothing makes sense. And that's when it happens. A pillow gets pushed onto her face so hard she cannot breathe. She said it genuinely felt like 2 large hands were pressing against her through the pillow. The pressure was so intense that her lips buckled against her teeth. But then something stranger happens, and she says that this part is difficult to describe, but it felt as though the entire vibration of her body had suddenly turned down. She said, imagine that you turn everything up on the base of a sound system so that everything becomes heavily distorted. She said that that's what inside of her body felt like. She said it was incredibly dense. She could barely move, barely speak, and before anybody says it was sleep paralysis, she was completely awake, had literally just been posting on social media seconds before it happened. And she said there's even a timestamp showing exactly when she was active. Then something pops into her mind. She remembers every ghost that she had ever seen in her entire life had told her, if you ever come across something evil, call on God. So she tries to say Jesus Christ, but nothing comes out. It was as if something was not allowing her to speak. Finally, with everything she had, she manages to force out the words Jesus Christ. The instant she said it, the pressure disappeared. I just got chills. The pillow released. She shot upright in the bed and the pillow literally flew from her face. And everything she had watched been pushed across the bed is exactly where it had been pushed aside. The indentation where something had been sitting behind her was still visible in the mattress. And then she saw, or perhaps only sensed, she can't really be sure, the darkest shadow she had ever experienced retreating down the hallway and disappearing into the small bathroom. Not gray, not black, blacker than black. She said it seemed to absorb the light around it. And she was like, I did not investigate. I knew immediately that I had to get out of there. She starts throwing her clothes and whatever she needed in a bag. Adrenaline is completely taking over at this point. And then strangely enough, she starts yelling, I'm from Brooklyn, bitch. Same. You don't get to mess with women. You are not welcome here. You have no permission to touch me. You get out. She said she has no idea why she was saying those things, but she just knew that she wasn't staying there for another second. She grabbed her bags, ran outside, jumped into the rental car, and drove to the nearest Holiday Inn about a mile away. Now, by this time, it's late at night, but when she gets to the Holiday Inn, the woman behind the desk asks, you didn't just drive up here tonight, did you? And she said, no, I was staying somewhere else, but let's just say I needed to change hotels. And then the woman asked, it wasn't Lakeside Hotel, was it? And that's when Shelley just looked at her and goes, actually it was. So the woman nods and says something that makes Shelley's blood run cold. And she said, you wouldn't believe how many people leave there and come here in the middle of the night. At this point, Shelley just laughs and goes, you know, I think I know why. I think that place is haunted. And she said that the other woman didn't say anything. She just handed her the room key. Shelley said that nothing happened that night. The room was completely quiet, peaceful, normal. Well, the next morning, the woman from the conference, the one that's holding it, comes and picks her up, and Shelley just tells her everything. And she said that woman and one of her friends just look at each other. And they told her that before that inn had been built, an old house stood on that property. According to them, the local kids that lived there believed that the elderly woman who lived in the house was a witch. Kids were terrified of it. They used to run past her house and throw rocks at it. Now, they're not sure that these stories are true, but what they both agreed on was that the property had always had a terrible reputation and a very unsettling energy, long before the inn was ever built. Needless to say, she did not spend another night there. She stayed at her host's home for the rest of the time she was there, and nothing weird happened. This day is the most terrifying paranormal experience of her life.
Wait, have y'all been seeing that crazy story about that single mom who was trying to save money? So she hired a 15-year-old girl to watch her baby while she was at work. But then when she was at work, her phone baby monitor kept going off like, your baby's crying, your baby's crying. So she kept checking it and the baby kept crying and crying. So she started trying to call the 15-year-old and be like, why aren't you getting the baby? Why is the baby crying and crying? Where are you? And she could not get a hold of the 15-year-old. And she also couldn't get away from work without having somebody to replace her. And there wasn't anybody there. So eventually it became a whole big deal because she eventually had to call the cops and be like, I have this person watching my baby and the baby's screaming and screaming. I cannot get a hold of her. I don't know what's happening. And so the cops had to show up at the house and make sure that nobody was dead. But it turned out that the girl was just asleep. She was just asleep because she was like, I had a long night. Wait, y'all, you haven't heard about that? Oh, my bad. That's probably because it wasn't a 15-year-old girl. It was Patrick Clancy. Patrick Clancy did that while Lindsay was at work. But I want you all to be asking yourselves, when you thought it was a girl child, why you were more willing to hold her accountable than a grown-ass man with his own baby. Just some food for thought.
This is genuinely one of the most disturbing creepy roommate stories that I've ever heard of or covered on this series, and trust me, I've done a lot of them. So this girl Olivia emails me and she says that a couple years ago she graduated college and she moved to Huntsville and she needed a roommate, and so she joined one of those girls groups on the internet and she met up with this girl named Anna who also needed a roommate, and these two girls were going to go into a lease together. So they find a 2-bedroom apartment, they sign the lease, and there was nothing about Anna that came off as creepy, right? She just seemed like a normal girl, and they weren't close friends or anything. This was just going to be a living arrangement. But initially, Anna was the ideal roommate. She was clean. She barely made noise. She worked a lot, so she wasn't home. But Olivia realized that something was sort of off after 2 weeks of living with her. She came home one day and she noticed that her door was slightly open. And she said, I always shut my door when I leave. It's just habit from college roommates and things like that. She said her bedroom was directly off the living room. And so she just always thought to do it right before she left for work in the morning. But she was like, okay, I just forgot. But then about a week later, it happens again. And she goes in her room and she's like, I know I closed the door this morning. And she noticed that her phone charger was moved. The phone charger was always plugged in behind her bed, and she ran it through the pull tab knob to her nightstand drawer, I guess, so she wouldn't have to bend over and pick it up off the floor every time she wanted to plug her phone in. But the phone charger was not pulled through the tab, and instead it was just sat next to her bed. And so she was like, okay, that's weird. Anna must have come in here and used my phone charger. So she doesn't even address it, but she goes to sleep that night, and in the morning she wakes up and her hairbrush, which she had just used before going to bed, was on the other nightstand, the side she doesn't even sleep on. So she's like, weird. Okay. Then a couple days after that, she noticed that her earrings, which she normally keeps in this little ceramic dish, were on her desk. So obviously she's thinking Anna is going in my room and going through my stuff. So just to make herself not feel crazy. One night before she went out with some friends, she took a photo of the way that her room was arranged. She took a photo of her closet, she took a photo of her nightstand, and she took a picture of her desk and then the little ceramic dish that was sitting on her dresser. She came home that night, didn't think about it, went to sleep, but woke up in the morning and remembered that she took the photo. And so she starts looking at her room and she noticed that everything looks exactly the same except for the little ceramic dish that she kept on her dresser was turned about 90 degrees. She's like, I know that sounds crazy, but there was definitely a change from the photo I took to how it was. She said, I remember staring at it for probably like 5 minutes. So then she goes out in the living room and she asks Anna, like, hey, have you been going into my room? And Anna's like, no, why? She said Anna looked genuinely confused, and she's like, oh, I just noticed that some things have been moved around. And Anna's like, maybe you're sleepwalking. Then Anna laughs, and Olivia said she laughed too because she was like, okay, like maybe I am getting up in the middle of the night and like moving stuff, like who knows. But this wouldn't be the last time that Anna says this to her. After that, she started noticing more little things, like if she was reading a book and she left it face down in the morning when she woke up, the book would be closed, or her closet would be open like 2 inches. Her phone would occasionally be on the opposite pillow. Once she came home from work and she found her bedroom window cracked open, and it was the middle of January. She's like, I knew that I hadn't opened that window. So she asked Anna, like, hey, did you open the window in my room? And Anna's like, no, but you know what? I've been cold all day. That's probably why. She's like, you know what, Olivia, maybe you opened it and you just forgot about it. And like, it's not a big deal. And Olivia's like, that didn't make any sense, but I just let it go. And then Olivia noticed that some of her food started going missing. It was just like small things. It'd be like half a granola bar or one Oreo from an unopened package. And so she asked Anna, like, hey, are you eating my food? And Anna's like, you know what, that might be me. And then Anna laughed, and Olivia said that the way that she said it just sort of bothered her. But then Anna started asking her weird questions. Like, she would be like, what time do you usually fall asleep at night? She'd be like, do you toss and turn a lot? Like, do you get up in the middle of the night a lot? And Olivia thought this was strange, but she was just like, why are you asking about that? And Anna was like, oh, I don't know. I'm just curious about your sleeping habits. Like, I haven't been sleeping well. And then once while they were watching TV together, Anna just asked her flat out, like, do you sleep with your door locked? And Olivia's like, no, why? And she goes, you probably should. There's a lot of like crime in this neighborhood. But they were in an apartment complex. It wasn't like there was just people walking around outside of their unit all the time. So Olivia just laughed it off, but Anna didn't laugh. And around this time, about 3 months-ish after they started living together, Olivia noticed that Anna was constantly tired. Like if they were watching TV at night, she would pass out on the couch at like 7 p.m. She started getting really, really dark circles under her eyes, and she would complain about insomnia. She actually looked so exhausted at one point that Olivia said, like, are you okay? Like, you don't look great. You don't look like you're sleeping. And Anna's like, yeah, no, I'm not sleeping much. And Olivia asked why, and she just shrugged. A few weeks after that, Olivia says that she started hearing noises at night, and it sounded like something moving, and she thought that there were mice in their walls. She ignored it, but then it kept happening, and so she actually made a complaint to the building's maintenance. And then one night, it sounded like it came directly from underneath her bed, or like underneath her floorboards. And so she actually sat up in bed, and she listened, and then it stopped. A few nights later, she heard it again, and then it sounded like something was dragged on the floor. So she actually got up out of bed, turned the lights on, and then peeked out in the living room, and she saw that Anna was asleep on the couch, or she thought she was because she had a blanket over her. Her eyes were closed, and so Olivia's like, it must be these mice. I have to make another complaint to maintenance. She goes back to bed, and in the morning she goes out in the living room, and Anna asked her, why were you up walking around at 3 a.m? And Olivia's like, how did you know I was awake? And Anna says, oh, I heard your bedroom door. But Olivia said she knew that this was a lie because her door is silent. It doesn't creak. It's a newer building, so she just knew that she was like full of it, and she was actually awake when she was pretending to be asleep on the couch. And that was the first time that Olivia says she felt uncomfortable because she knew that Anna was lying. Shortly after that, she noticed there were some scratches on her bed frame that she hadn't noticed, and she had bought this when she moved into the place, so it wasn't like it happened when they were moving or something. And so she asked Anna about it, and she was like, hey, do you know what happened to my bed set? Like, there's scratches on my bed frame. And Anna says, oh, it's probably your cat. And Olivia's like, I don't have a cat. And she knew that she didn't have a cat. And Anna's like, oh, sorry, I forgot. And that's when Olivia started getting scared, and she started sleeping with her door locked. But not only that, she would put small objects in front of her door at night just for added protection, I guess, because she had a sneaking suspicion that Anna was actually coming into her room at night and moving things around for whatever reason. And for a while, she'd wake up and everything was in its place. And so she was like, okay, like, that's weird. I don't know why she was coming in my room at night. But then one morning she woke up and one of the water bottles she'd put in front of the door was knocked over, but the door was still locked. She's like, okay, I told myself myself, like I just must have knocked it over. But then the night everything happened, it was like 2:40 in the morning. She had woken up and she couldn't get back to sleep, so she rolled over and she started watching TikToks on her phone. And then she dropped her phone and it slid off the bed and landed on the floor. And so it was like dark, and so she's like feeling around on the floor for it, but she doesn't see it. And she's like, oh, it must have gone under the bed. So she gets out of bed, she turns on the lamp, and she gets down on the floor and looks under her bed, and she sees two eyes looking at her. The eyes were wide open. They were looking directly at her, and she said she just absolutely froze. She couldn't even scream. She said she just backed up and she was like, who are you? But then as her eyes adjusted to the dark underneath the bed, she realized that it was Anna. She was lying completely flat on her stomach underneath Olivia's bed. Her face was turned toward her and she was smiling, and all Olivia could think to say was, Anna? And she didn't answer. She just stared at her, and then very calmly she whispered, you dropped your phone. And she said she just booked it. She ran out of the apartment. She doesn't even remember closing the door, grabbing her keys. She ended up at the neighbor's apartment and she called the police. But this is the worst part. The police come. They ask her what she was missing. She's like, I'm not missing anything. She was just under my bed. The police look under the bed. They find a portable phone charger, a notebook, crackers, a bottle of water, a flashlight, and inside the notebook, Anna had been logging weird little details about Olivia's life, like what time she fell asleep, her work schedule, things she'd worn, people she had talked to. And they realized that she had not been sleeping underneath Olivia's bed once or twice, but apparently for a period of weeks. The police also found dozens of photos of Olivia sleeping on Anna's phone. And apparently when they asked Anna why she did it, she just said, I didn't hurt her. And they said, okay, but why are you sleeping underneath her bed? And she said she just wanted to be closer to her, and that sleeping under there made her feel calm. She apparently told police that the first time she did it was an accident. Supposedly she went in there because she had forgot something of hers, which could be plausible, who knows. And then she noticed that the underside of the bed was big enough for her to slide underneath, and so she did it, and she liked the feeling that she got from being underneath the bed, and from there she just started doing it more often. So it didn't start out of nowhere. She did it a couple of times, and then it was like every night. She said she waited for Olivia to fall asleep before crawling under there, and usually she would stay up, but sometimes she would fall asleep under there, and that's apparently why she was so tired all the time. But all of the noises that Olivia had been hearing that she thought were mice inside the apartment complex was really her roommate hiding underneath her bed. If you have a spooky scary story time, something that happened to you that you feel like is crazy or unsettling, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
The person that sent me the story called it Surrounded by Souls. Woo! By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hey, Jess. Hi. I love your channel, and it's so up my alley. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Anywho, I have a few stories for you, but the most recent one happened to me when I was pregnant first, but later on miscarried. There's a lot of taboo about talking about miscarriages, and I have my own take on why. On August 7th, 2024, I had brought my husband and I tickets to go to see Creed and Three Doors Down, which for some reason my entire life I've always gravitated towards. And the time I didn't know that I was pregnant, so I had a hard seltzer, and the show ended up being incredible. After the concert, a massive wave of exhaustion came over me. We drove to Long Beach Island, about 30 minutes away, not far from the concert venue. We stayed at the motel on this particular day, and it was stormy and very windy, very unlike what the weather is normally there because it's 12 miles off the coast. The weather usually just skips it and hits the mainland instead. Anyways, we usually stay at a particular hotel when we were there, but that was closed as it was later in the season and everything was booked out. I felt a little uneasy staying at this different hotel that we never had been to before since it wasn't one that we were familiar with, and partly because the room was so spacious, almost too spacious. My husband kept asking me, come on, baby, let's go do something, and I just couldn't manage to even get my head off the bed. I felt completely floored and unable to move. As I had never been pregnant before, I thought maybe I had caught something like a virus or something at the concert, that I was having a weird reaction to the hard seltzer that I was drinking. After a moment, I started to get really freaked out, wondering what was happening to me. The next thing I felt was like I was being swarmed by hundreds of souls. I was having an anxiety attack while I was laying in this bed, and the only way that I could describe it was like it felt like these souls were trying to enter my body, but unable to stick. And I knew none of them felt like they should have been there. And despite the room being so big, I felt claustrophobic. I knew I was surrounded by it, but I almost felt like there wasn't one that was good enough or the right fit because I just didn't feel safe in a sense. Being as overwhelmed as I did is my only guess is what mediums must feel like when they feel like a soul is trying to communicate with them. Unfortunately, I later found out that I had been pregnant and miscarried about 7 weeks later. I know it sounds crazy, but it was only afterwards that I had realized that that's why I was being surrounded and swarmed. It was so one of them could get to the embryo first. Fast forward to 3 months later, I got pregnant again. Thankfully, this pregnancy was a healthy one, and the due date my doctor had given us happened to be August 7th.
Oh my God, that was the date of the concert. The end.
Okay, this was so interesting. I wonder why you were experiencing that. Like, people get pregnant all the time, and I've never heard of anyone experiencing like that they had this wave of exhaustion. They couldn't even get up. They felt really weird. And then they like felt and saw like a bunch of souls, like so many souls, hundreds of them just swarming and trying to get into your body. That's like the weirdest thing I've ever heard. No, it's not. It's not the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I don't know why I said that, but it's a really weird thing. I haven't ever heard that before because in my knowledge from what I have read and listened to in videos I've watched and all the things, we're like choosing to go into a body, right? And it's like you choose and then you get put in there or you go in there or whatever. And it's not that there's hundreds of souls trying to get in your body. And you didn't have that experience the second time when you actually got pregnant and had the baby, I'm assuming. But that definitely seems like why you miscarried the first time, because all those souls, there were so many trying to get in there and you said none of them felt right and they couldn't like stick right. So that's probably why that happened. But are there any like mediums out there that know what this is? Have you ever heard of this before? And like, have you ever heard of like souls just swarming to get in? Or do we think that those were not like actual souls of like good actual, I say people, but souls trying to get into the body for real, trying to get pregnant? Do we think that it was like a bunch of, maybe she was just like in a very vulnerable state for some reason, or the place that they stayed wasn't good or something, and those were like random souls just trying to hop in the body and then that made her pregnant, then that didn't stick? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I am so baffled by this. I need some answers from other people. Please give me your opinions in the comments. Thank you so much for sharing your story. How cool and weird.
Just because the voice is familiar doesn't mean you should trust it. Welcome back to the series where I tell true horror experiences submitted by you, the viewers. Today's true horror experience is submitted by viewer Erin. Thank you so much for submitting your experience to the channel. I think if I've learned anything from today's submission, it's that if you get that gut feeling that something is wrong, it's important you listen to it. Better be safe than sorry. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Today's experience takes place in Asia, where we're going back to the Philippines. This happened when I was 9 or 10 years old. I was at my aunt's house, and it was huge. 3 floors, an outside kitchen, a pool, and I'd assume maybe 5 to 10 acres, including the forest behind. Crazy, right? I was with 5 of my cousins and my grandma at the time of the incident, while our parents were out in the city. We were in the backyard playing on the swings, while our grandmother was cooking dinner. But I couldn't help but notice that the eldest cousin was missing. Well, that's until I heard her calling from the second floor.
Kids, your auntie has a gift for you.
My other cousin, who was her younger brother, wasn't buying it. Stop lying, he said. She's not even here. He was always a stubborn kid, pouted whenever she teased us with pranks. But regardless, she didn't stop, insisting that we come inside and head upstairs. I will admit, at this point, suspicion did start to grow within me. Stop lying, he yelled. I know you're trying to prank us. However, it was with how insistent she was that doubt started to creep in. Perhaps merely she was just trying to show us something. I mean, the eldest was certainly mischievous at times, but a liar? No way. It took some convincing from the rest of the group, but eventually everybody headed inside. But when I say I took no more than 5 steps in, I felt something, and I know the rest of the group did too. You know that gut feeling you get when something isn't quite right, accompanied by a heavy compulsion to run. Without any hesitation, we sprinted into the yard and headed straight towards the kitchen so that we could seek comfort within our grandma. And when we got there, well, there she was, but standing next to her, helping her cook, was our eldest cousin. Impossible. I don't think I've ever been in such a state of shock as I was in that moment. But somehow through it we managed to explain what had happened, and oh, how their faces turned cold. Without hesitation, my grandma directed us towards her room, locking us in while she waited outside. She was a devout Catholic and absolutely fearless, refusing to move. After a while, we heard our aunt's car pull into the driveway, and with permission, we went out to greet her. We didn't tell her what had happened, besides informing her that perhaps she should be careful on the second floor, which was obviously met with puzzled looks. I'm much older now, and so are my cousins. But it's as if they've just forgotten. Every time I mention it, I feel a shiver go down my spine, but every time they think I'm crazy.
Change my mind. I think that this is the scariest story I've ever read. So if you get scared easily, now's the time to scroll. If you don't scare easily, welcome back to a series I like to call Scary Ass Stories That Y'all Send Me. Today we're talking about haunted farmhouses. This one legitimately scared me so bad that I didn't even think I was going to make a video. But here we are. So let's get into it. Someone's email did not specify whether or not they wanted to remain anonymous, so for the story's sake, I'm just going to call her Katie. Katie says that when she first started school, she developed a friendship with a girl who invited her up to stay at her family's cottage for a weekend. Her friend did give her a warning beforehand about this very old farmhouse cottage. Katie's friend, we'll call her Marissa, clued Katie in on the history of the house. So Marissa's dad found this house in the 1970s completely abandoned. And prior to them buying and living in this house, this old farmhouse was used as a halfway house for drunk Irish priests. Anyways, immediately upon getting to the house, Katie says that there was just something off. She says that she felt extremely uneasy and like she was constantly being watched in this home. Almost like she felt like the house was alive. At one point during this weekend, Marissa's mom actually asked Katie to go upstairs and grab her slippers. And as she reached the top of the staircase, she went into their room, picked up the slippers. As she stood up, she looked in a mirror that was right in front of her and saw that there were two people laying in Marissa's family's bed. She describes them as being like bluish, grayish, almost translucent like. Immediately whips around and there is nobody and nothing in this bed. She doesn't say anything. She just goes back downstairs and gives the slippers to the mom. That night, everybody was around a fire having a couple beers. And after a couple drinks, Katie actually musters up the courage to ask Marissa, hey, is this house haunted by chance? Marissa just goes absolutely quiet. After a couple seconds of just silence, she says, yeah, a couple of weird things have happened. Before Katie could even respond, Marissa says, like this one time I saw these two people laying in my parents' bed. All the hairs on Katie's body stood up. At this point in time, she had not told Marissa anything about that, and she hadn't told anybody else about that experience. Same room, same bed, same situation. Katie actually says that she would go up to that cottage really frequently after this, and nothing came close to that first night that she was there. I absolutely need to know what y'all would do in that situation if you were staying with a friend that you had just met, and the first night staying at their house, something like that happens. But that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
I am absolutely fuming. All thanks to a hotel I booked via booking.com that's just been an absolute nightmare tonight. So basically, I'm doing a bit of a ghostly trip over to Northumberland. So it's 4 hours drive from home. Hotel's pre-booked, sorted it, prepaid, all done. No qualms. Drive down, get to the hotel, and it's, you know, the top floor of an old historic pub, so perfect for me, what I like. And I get to the bar and I'm like, I'm here to check in. And I see her like roll her eyes and go, oh God. And I thought, well, that's not a good start, is it? And she calls some man in the back and he comes out. And he's like, so sorry mate, we're not accepting any bookings. And I said, no, I've already paid it in full. I don't know what it's already my room. He said, no, for the last 6 weeks we've not been having any guests because we can't accommodate for guests anymore, so it shouldn't be on booking.com. I was like, well, it is, and it's charged me in full, and I'm nearly 4 hours away from home with nowhere to now go. I can't just turn around and go back home. So anyway, we stood in the pub for ages debating what to do. Some of the locals were really good. They started looking on the phones for me at other places that could stay. but I didn't want to have to pay for somewhere else just like that after I've done a big 4-hour drive. So I got back into the car, rang booking.com and tried to find out what's been going on, because allegedly this hotel has sent booking.com the confirmation that they're not accepting guests anymore, but I literally pulled it up on my phone in front of the hotel manager and said I could book another night for tomorrow if I wanted. So it's like a scam. It's like scamming people when there is no room to stay in. So get in the car, get on the phone to booking.com, explain everything. This phone call, folks, went on for 1 hour 30 minutes. So ultimately, in a nutshell, as not to bore you with it all, they can refund me the money for the hotel that doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, obviously as expected. And I said to them, can you sort me a new hotel? Because I've looked on the system, I can't find anything in close proximity that's anywhere near the price. They're all about treble, because obviously I'm booking it and I need it right now. So they're looking into it. They come to the same conclusion as me and said, after ages of me back and forth and with them, I've got to pay up front for the room for tonight, so over £200. And when I get a nil balance invoice off the hotel to prove I've paid for a second hotel, then they'll be able to refund it me in 7 to 10 days. How terrible is that? So fortunately I had that, money there to pay for another room. Otherwise, what would I have done? Either stayed in the car or driven another near 4 hours back home after I've just done them here, which is just not plausible. You haven't got the energy to safely drive, well I haven't anyway, to safely drive nearly 8 hours in one sitting. It was just stressful and it was horrible, and I'm in a really bad mood. Yeah, I'm fuming. I'm really annoyed. It's just ruined it really. And I suspect the hotel didn't actually notify booking.com, because why would they just leave it on and allow people to continue booking? I don't really believe that. I think they're probably the ones who've made the mistake here. Hopefully moving forwards now they remove it off booking.com, because other people are gonna fall into the trap and hopefully not drive as far as I have. So anyway, I shot Chillingham Castle today, so that video will be coming soon. So I've got that out of the road trip, and I'm doing the Annick Poison Gardens tomorrow, which is why I wanted to stay over here for the night as well as for travelling for Chillingham Castle. So yeah, be careful when you're booking hotels. Maybe ring them first and make sure it's a genuine booking. Honest to God.
Jinns can diddle you. Not just that. They can fall in love with you, get emotionally attached to you, marry you even. And this could all prevent you from finding love with a person, a human being. And the worst part is, you could be completely unaware of any of that. They do this without your knowledge. Isn't that crazy? It's not funny. They can also possess you and make you say or do things that you don't really want to do. There are also good jinn, ones that are Muslims and go to the masjid. They don't diddle you. I don't know how rare it is for jinn to fall in love with people. Just keep saying Bismillah and doing your daily adhkar, and I think you should be okay. If not, look for somebody that does ruqya. Don't get diddled by jinn, guys. Do your daily du'as, your daily adhkar, and Bismillah before everything.
If an officer ever tells you that an animal stood up and walked away like a human, you might assume that he was suffering from exhaustion or fear or something that made him see something that was not there. But in this case, the officer's dash cam supposedly caught the whole thing. So, according to the story, this happened in northern Michigan in 2019. And I'm not going to name the county because I have no way of actually verifying the report. This was sent in to me. But the man who shared it, he claimed that his uncle worked as a sheriff's deputy there for nearly 20 years. And he was a pretty stand-up guy, very straightforward, no BS kind of guy. So shortly after 2 a.m, dispatch received 3 separate calls about an enormous injured dog lying beside a rural highway. The first caller thought it had been struck by a car, the second described it as a black bear, but the third caller insisted that it was a dog, just the largest one that he'd ever seen. And the nearest deputy was about 15 minutes away, which was our viewer's uncle. And when he arrived, the highway was completely empty. There were no other houses nearby, there's no streetlights on that road, and the woods on either side of him were so dense that his headlights barely reached beyond the tree line. And that's when he saw it. Something was dark lying in the ditch approximately 50 feet ahead of his patrol car. And from behind the windshield, it looked like an unusually large dog with coarse black fur. And its back was facing the road, and one of its hind legs appeared to be pretty badly injured. The deputy radioed dispatch and asked him if they can contact animal control, although he doubted they probably wouldn't respond at that hour. So he positioned his vehicle with the headlights illuminating the ditch. And then he stepped outside carrying his flashlight, and as soon as his door opened, the animal lifted its head. And the deputy immediately noticed something was wrong with its proportions. Its front legs seemed much longer than they should have been. Its shoulders were unusually wide. Even while lying down, he was able to tell. It looked larger than a deer. So he called out to it softly with a few whistles and a few clicks, hoping that it might be someone's injured pet. The animal didn't growl, it didn't bark, it simply just turned its head and looked directly at him. The deputy later claimed its eyes reflected the flashlight, but not like a normal animal's eyes, right? Instead of shining that greenish yellow, they appeared to be pale and almost colorless. He stopped walking, and that was when the animal began to move. At first, he tried pulling itself farther into the ditch using its front legs. The deputy could hear its heavy breathing, and he assumed that its back legs were probably broken. So he lowered his flashlight and took another cautious step forward. Then the animal planted both front paws against the ground, and its body, he said, was trembling as it was trying to push itself upward. And the deputy thought that it was trying to stand on all fours, but it wasn't. The creature straightened its back, lifted its front legs away from the ground, and slowly stood upright on two legs. And according to the dashcam timestamp, it remained in that position for approximately 4 to 6 seconds. And it was long enough for the headlights to reveal that whatever was standing beside the highway was over 6 feet tall. The deputy immediately froze, and his flashlight remained pointed directly at it the whole time. The animal's injured leg, which had looked useless only seconds earlier, now supported its full massive weight, and its front limbs hung near its sides, and its paws seemed to curl inward, almost like hands. And then it took one awkward step backward, and then another. The deputy drew his weapon and shouted for it to stay where it was, and he later admitted he didn't know why he said that, but training most likely took over. And for one terrifying moment, his mind stopped treating it like an animal, and he started treating it like something else because it was moving like a person. And the creature turned toward the woods, dropped back down onto all fours, and crossed the ditch with no sign of injury or anything. And within seconds, it disappeared between the trees. So the deputy returned back to his vehicle, and he called for backup. 2 additional officers arrived, and together they searched the edge of the woods, and they reportedly found several deep impressions in the mud, but none were clear enough to identify as paw prints or anything like that. They also found something else near the place where the creature had been lying, a patch of deep dark fur that was soaked in blood, but there was no body. The official report allegedly described the animal as a large unidentified canine, and the deputy's dashcam footage was collected with the rest of the evidence, and he was instructed not to discuss what he thought he had actually seen and leave it as that. So a few days later, someone from the department showed him the recording of it, and the video was very dark and very grainy, but the animal could be seen in the headlights. More importantly, the footage showed it rising from the ditch and standing on 2 legs, exactly how he had seen it. The audio also captured something that the deputy claimed he did not notice that night, and it basically caught an EVP. Just before the creature entered the woods, a low voice could be heard somewhere near the patrol car saying, "Just leave." That was all it said. It just said leave. And it was very clear. So the deputy reportedly remained with the department for another 2 years before resigning early. He never publicly claimed that he had encountered a werewolf or a dogman or anything supernatural like that. He would only say that it wasn't a bear and it wasn't a dog, and he knew what he saw. But the original dash cam recording was never surfaced publicly, at least not in a form that can be authenticated. So maybe this is simply, an exaggerated police story that grew, stranger and stranger with every retelling. But the man who shared it claimed his uncle still refuses to drive that patch of highway at night. And whenever anyone asks, what truly happened beside the road that night, he always pretty much gives the same answer. He just says, it wasn't injured when I found it, and it was pretending to be. And he truly feels that it was pretending to be this helpless, injured animal to lure him in, to get him close enough to do whatever. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you're from Michigan or northern Michigan and you've heard of other stories like this, let me know.
What are the weirdest experiences that you've had because you listened to your intuition? This lady says that she was having a dream that her son was vomiting. She ends up getting jolted awake and immediately runs to her son's bedroom. When she gets to his room, she finds her son choking on his own vomit. She explains that he wasn't sick or anything like that, but she believes that her dream literally saved her son's life. Can you imagine if she had woken up and was like, oh, thank God it was a dream, and went back to sleep? This girl's intuition told her to go to the grocery store with her mom when she never did, and that literally saved her life because 30 minutes later their house was up in flames. This girl says that she had a dream of her situationship's password. The following morning she tried it, it was the password, and she found a lot of things in that phone. This lady says that she was at a crosswalk, she was pregnant, and she had her 10-year-old son there. The light turned on that told her to walk, but for whatever reason she said she didn't move, she stayed very still. In that moment, a red Jeep passed the red light going so fast. If she had walked across the street, they would not be alive right now. This lady says that she doesn't know if this was just a coincidence or her intuition, but she had a dream of the operation and the results of her biopsy a week before they even gave it to her, and everything was exactly how her dream described. Has anything weird ever happened to you for listening to your intuition?
Comments I should not have read by myself at night. Teachers and staff, the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you at school you could not explain. When I worked as a substitute, I went into a special education classroom and all the students were allowed to bring a friend to eat during lunchtime in the classroom. They got to get a friend from another classroom to eat with us. One student didn't bring anyone, but said his friend Herbert was there, but clearly there was no one there. During lunchtime, all the students were allowed to ask their friend one question about them. Their student asked his imaginary friend a question where he said, Herbert, why do you have bat wings? I nearly evaporated. A 3-year-old preschool student once told me he knew my dad and how my dad was in heaven and he misses me. My dad passed when I was 5 and I never spoke about him to my students. Still gives me the chills until this day. I used to work maintenance at a local grammar school and I had the night shift. When I first started working at the school, there was one classroom I actively rushed through to clean because the room just felt heavy and I always felt like I was being watched. After a few months, I asked the teacher of that class if she ever felt weird in the classroom, and she straight up said, oh yeah, it's haunted. Some of the kids have seen a little girl run into the room closet. She proceeded to show me the recording of a student explaining what he saw. I have the recording if anyone wants to watch, just DM me. And did. We had a pre-K baby one year who was always running around the cafeteria screaming, so I stopped him and said, Leroy, you need to calm down and have a seat. And he looked me straight in the eyes and said with a deep, dark, sinister voice, Leroy isn't here right now. I let him go so fast. I know that's right. I taught kindergarten over 15 years ago. One Monday, the staff got word that one of our students' mothers had passed away in a car crash. One day that week, I was transitioning the class with that kid in it. The line was moving inside the building, but she didn't move. She stood still, swaying back and forth with a look of unbelievable terror in her eyes. I said, come on, child's name, let's go. She replied, I can't. My mama doesn't want to let me go. Me and another teacher broke down, and at that moment, my entire body went cold, and I was so sad and scared at the same time. More scared than sad. I was a teacher for the YMCA, for the koala room, 5-year-old room, and me and my coworker were putting the kids down for a nap. Normally, we talk as we do this, and I asked her what she did the past weekend, and she said she went to church and she prayed, and the child she was putting asleep lifted his head, and in a deep, guttural voice, he said, I don't pray. Then he put his head down. We just looked at each other in disbelief. It made sense to me why his behavior was so negative. I still wonder whatever became of him. Girl, he became the devil's strongest soldier. I had a student that now I only can describe as having multiple personalities. He would do crazy things and say that Devil X told him to do them. Sometimes his voice would change into this creepy, deep voice. He was a 2nd grader. One day he was flipping out and speaking in this deep voice, and I knew he'd say Devil X told him to do it. So I said, hey, Tell Devil X he is not welcome in this classroom. He looked at me and said, well, he's standing right next to you. I brought my granny's praying oil the next day because, oiled down the classroom and prayed hard. Keep them coming, teachers, and everybody else, come back for more.
We have to ask ourselves, what happened at the Dial Talk Pass that night, February 1959? Now, there's one piece of evidence that everyone always overlooks, and that's the fact that they discovered the tent these 9 hikers were staying in had been cut from the inside. So that means that whatever scared them that night came from inside the tent. So I have this theory as to what might have happened. And this is the story that I've came up with. So the 9 hikers were asleep in their tent that night, when all of a sudden one of the hikers, Igor, awakes. He begins to hear a sound coming from outside. It's almost like a slight, raspy scream. Igor wakes the other hikers. What is that? They all begin to hear it. Over and over again, they hear this light, raspy scream. Igor says, there's something out there. Nikola responds, we should go investigate. Igor says, I don't think that's a good idea. We should stay in the tent. Nikola says, no, we must see. So Nikola, against Igor's wishes, unzips the tent and he leaves. Now, after 5 minutes, Nikola doesn't return. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And that's when Igor starts to say to the other hikers, something is wrong. He should be back by now. Something has happened to him. The other hikers reassured him everything is probably okay. I'm sure he'll be back. And right at that moment, they hear the tent unzip. And there is Nikola. But he is with Yuri. Yuri, who left several days before because he said he wasn't feeling well. So Igor says, where did you go? Like, I was worried about you. Like, what happened? What was that noise? And Nikola says, I found Yuri. Yuri was out walking near the tent. And he said he was lost and he needed help. So I brought him to the other hikers. And that's when Yuri said, yes, I've came back. I am fine. Everything's all right. You can all go back to sleep and we'll talk about why I came back in the morning. So one by one, the hikers laid down. Except for Igor. Igor looked at Yuri. Something was off about him. His skin kind of seemed weird. His eyes seemed bigger and brighter. Something about the way he talked was very creepy to Igor. Igor couldn't get it out of his mind. So as all the other hikers were asleep, he notices that Yuri hasn't laid down. Yuri is just sitting there staring at these other hikers. So Igor says to Yuri, hey, what happened out there? You know, where did you come from? I thought you left. And Yuri responds, look, everything is okay. You need to stop worrying. Go back to sleep. And he goes, but it seems strange, Yuri. You know, how did you just come back? You left 3 days ago. You walked all that way alone. And Igor starts to question him even more. And that's when Yuri looks at him and says, what's the matter? Are you afraid? And as he turns, his body began to transform. And what once was this man slowly became this beast with sharp nails, sharp teeth, these bright yellow eyes. So instantly, Igor grabs his pocket knife and he cuts open the tent and he yells to the other hikers, "We need to leave now." They all run out of the tent and they take off running. But they get separated. And one by one, you could hear the screams. And that's when, all of a sudden, Igor was alone by himself. And he knew that all the other hikers were gone. And then he heard it, a sound. And then he looked behind him, and there was this hideous beast. And that was the last thing that Igor saw. So what do you think happened at the Dial-Toff Pass?
To make a short story long, I was talking to my sister today, and she's venting to me, telling me all the different things that she done been through. I'm letting her talk. I'm not really saying much. And out of thin fucking air, she blurts out, "But you lived a crazy ass lifestyle. I could never live a life like you. Like, that's just too crazy. The stuff you've been through is just crazy. I would never want to live a life like that." While she's saying this, I'm making a mental list of the crazy things I've been through. Because yes, I do think that I have lived a crazy life, but I'm all for a stupid question. So I ask her, "What do you mean by that?" Because I want to know, what the fuck was you thinking about to make you just say some shit like that out loud? And to my face at that. Like that wouldn't hurt my feelings or something? Come on. So she tells me, and she's just like, "You done had a gun pointed at you? Like, that is just way too crazy. Someone pointing a gun at you is just so crazy to me. Like, I could not live like that." And what's even crazier is that wasn't on my mental list. Like, I literally forgot about that, and it happened twice. The first time it happened was by a nigga over another nigga. Gay, but I'm not one to judge. I'm starting to think that op is just another term for jealous ex-homeboy. Because if you mad at that nigga, go get that nigga. Why are you pressing me about it? But he didn't shoot me, so it's all gravy. The second time it happened, I used to drive a blue Mustang. So I pulled up to this tattoo shop in Oak Cliff. And as I'm opening my door, all of a sudden a shadow of a nigga come on the side of my door, open my door a little bit, and holds a gun to my head. And I was sitting over there and I look and I say, "The fuck?" Like, that's my real life reaction. I literally look at the nigga and I say, "Fuck?" This nigga looks at me, and while I'm looking at him, I'm trying to figure out which one of my little shits is out to get me. And I look closer. The last shit I was dealing with was light skin. This nigga black as shit. Ain't no fucking way I'm finna get hit by a random nigga. If it was my shit, understood, crime of passion. But a random nigga, that's how I get sent home? No fucking way. As I'm looking at this nigga and he looking at me, he looked for a second and he was just like, "Oh shit, I thought you was somebody else." I'm like, "Nah, just me." And he stepped back and he was like, "Oh, okay, be safe." Trying is real hard under these fucking conditions. I came to that tattoo shop to finish the rest of my sleeve. Safe to say, I went the fuck home. What the fuck was that about? Like, whenever you live a crazy life, it's just so much shit. It's so unplanned and unprepared. Like, who the fuck even comes up with it? Who is writing the play to my fucking story? And for y'all who's wondering, "Oh, did you call the police?" Like, did you call the police whenever these things happen to you? Do you call the police? Out of all the drive-bys, shootouts, niggas holding guns to my head, being robbed, motherfuckers breaking into my house, I have never thought to call the police. It literally doesn't even pop up in my brain to pull my phone out and dial 911. But I do call my niggas though. And that's a lot like calling Paw Patrol, because Chase is always on the case. New Year's resolution, I hope to live a completely normal life. I want to see how the other side lives.
Am I the asshole for refusing to move on from my ex-boyfriend? My boyfriend broke up with me 8 months ago, if you can even call it a breakup. He just came over one night, cried and screamed, and then left. And he hasn't answered any of my calls or texts since. No explanation, not even an official "it's over" conversation. I mean, we had been fighting and he said that I was just acting out for attention. And I guess maybe I was, but I don't know, I just wanted proof that he actually cared about me, you know? And instead, he called the cops on me. Now he's dating around and I can't get over him. I mean, I didn't get any closure, and I guess that's just making it hard for me to accept that it's really over. I've run into him a couple of times. Okay, several times, and maybe it wasn't exactly a coincidence, but I just wanted to talk. I just want to know why he didn't want me, and I thought for sure that if he saw me, he would realize it was a mistake. But every time he sees me, he looks like he's going to be sick. I mean, am I really that disgusting? And these new girls that he's dating, they act like I'm not even there. I tried texting him, and at first he ignored me, so for a while I thought that he had blocked me. But he finally responded this morning. But it's hard to even be excited about that because it wasn't exactly the let's work this out message I was hoping for. I think he was way out of line and that he was the asshole for treating me like this. We were together for 3 years and I think that I deserve at least some kind of closure. So his text this morning said, I don't know who you are, but this has to stop. It's not funny and it's honestly crossing a huge line. I don't know how you got this number, but Eva's been dead for months, and these texts are horribly inappropriate. Stop contacting me.
Behind me is a serial killer, and a lot of people don't know about her. This is the story of Leonarda Cianciulli, also known as the soap maker of Correggio. Reminder, I cover a lot of dark stories on this page, so viewer discretion is advised, but follow along if you want to hear more. This is during World War II in fascist Italy, and it's kind of a case study in how being left alone with your grief can turn you into a monster. Like many villains, Leonarda Cianciulli started as a sympathetic character. Leonarda had been pregnant 17 times. Out of those 17 pregnancies, 4 children survived. She lost 13 children, 10 to early infant death, and 3 to miscarriage. The repeated losses devastated Leonarda and affected her mind profoundly, and she became obsessed with the terror that she could possibly lose her 4 surviving children. And that is the point in which all of her decisions operate. So that's the foundation. Side note, there's actually a phrase for what Leonarda is experiencing right now, and the phrase is called disenfranchised grief. You might have experienced it. This is grief that society refuses to recognize or give you permission to mourn. And pregnancy loss, for a long time, and probably still to this day, remain a great example of that. And this is 1930s Italy. Grief therapy is not a thing. The most you could expect at the time was an apology and a rosary. What's worse is that her grief was disenfranchised twice over. Because infant mortality was so normalized at the time, society's instinct was just to say, it's okay, just have another baby. Everybody's babies are dying. What makes yours so special? Now, we all know that it's a unique kind of wound that's created when you're told that your pain doesn't count. And for Leonarda, it pushed her past the brink of sanity. I mean, she fully blamed herself for all of her pregnancy losses. So how did she cope with this? Well, she went to her psychic, of course. She became deeply superstitious, so she started frequenting fortune tellers. This was before Google, you know? Dipshit fortune teller told her that all of her children were going to die young. And a palm reader told her, in your right hand, I see prison, and in your left, a criminal asylum. And that was it. Leonarda turned to the dark side. Here's where things go off the rails. In 1939, Leonarda learns that her darling son, Giuseppe, has been called to serve in the army for World War II. Obviously, she's saying the curse is coming true. And so in her twisted, grief-stricken mind, a sick idea started to form that she could save her son's life through human sacrifice. So she hatched her plot. Leonarda targeted 3 lonely, desperate women, all with the promise to better their lives. The first one she lured in with a fake marriage. The second woman she lured in with a fake school job. And another one with fake housing. Leonardo told each of the women not to tell anybody about this opportunity because it was a secret. She lured all these women into safety, so they walked right into her trap. Leonardo killed them with an axe and dissolved the bodies in caustic soda, and she later claimed that she used the blood to put into cakes and used their fat to make soap, which is how she earned her nickname, the soap maker of Correggio. So how was Leonardo caught? Her last victim was an opera singer. Her sister-in-law became suspicious when they hadn't seen her in a while, and she told police that the last she'd seen her was at Leonardo's house. Leonardo was arrested, and she denied the crime until police started to suspect that her son Giuseppe had committed the crimes, who survived the war, by the way. Now, ironically, the reason police suspected Giuseppe was because he sent postcards from the victims under his mother's instruction. Giuseppe wound up spending years in prison because of the crimes his mother committed, and he was eventually released because Leonardo wound up confessing everything in order to clear him. She was put on trial in 1946, and it was bizarre. She seemed almost proud of her crimes, and she corrected the prosecutor on the details too. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison, 3 in a criminal asylum, and she died there in 1970. So it turns out that the palm reader's prophecy, a prison and a criminal asylum, came true.
Tonight's spooky story comes from someone who encountered something unexplainable while traveling abroad with her husband. Whatever it was seemed to know things about their relationship that no stranger possibly could. So grab a blanket, maybe a snack, and get settled in for tonight's Midnight Confessions, Stories from the Dark. A few years ago, my husband Tom and I spent 2 weeks traveling abroad together. We had been married for almost 8 years, and the trip was supposed to be something special. This was our first vacation in a long time, and we were hoping that this time together would allow us to reconnect after facing some difficulties in our relationship. Instead, the trip exposed every problem that we'd been avoiding. It had been exactly 1 year and 3 months since I had caught Tom cheating. I found inappropriate texts between him and his coworker on our shared iPad, which led me to kicking him out of our house. Tom insisted that he'd made a mistake and that this was something that was brought on by our continued marital problems, and he begged me to take him back. I eventually gave in after he quit his job and swore that he would never speak to her again. But I never got over what he did. By the second week of our trip, we were exhausted and irritated with each other. One of our final stops was a small riverside town several hours from the capital, where we planned to finish out the day with a nice dinner. But we just ended up arguing. The argument began because he wanted to change our plans for the following morning, but it quickly became about everything else. I accused him of avoiding any serious conversation about our future, and he accused me of turning every disagreement into proof that he did not care about me and that he was cheating again. By the time we left the restaurant, neither of us wanted to speak. An old pedestrian bridge connected the historic district to the neighborhood where our Airbnb was located. I noticed a few broken planks and a weathered wooden sign nailed near the entrance. Someone had painted the crude outline of a woman on it, but there were no words that I could read. Against my better judgment, I followed Tom onto the bridge. The wooden boards creaked beneath our shoes. Several of the decorative lamps flickered as we passed. We were almost halfway across when I heard footsteps beneath us. When I stepped forward, I caught a glimpse of something moving below a gap in the planks. I looked over the railing to see what it was, but there was nothing beneath us except the dark water and the wooden supports of the bridge. Tom had stopped with me. I told him I thought I heard something beneath the planks, but I must have been mistaken. We started walking again, and the footsteps returned. Bare feet slapped against the underside of the wooden boards, moving directly below us. Then a woman's voice whispered from beneath the bridge, "He doesn't love you." I could tell from Tom's face that he heard it too. Then another voice came from below. "I only came because I had to." Tom insisted that he had not said anything, but I wasn't so sure since I wasn't looking at him when I heard the voice. The boards beneath us creaked, and something moved below my feet. I crouched and looked through one of the narrow gaps between the planks. A woman was crawling along the underside of the bridge. She wore a pale dress soaked through with what I assumed was river water, and her wet, dark hair covered her face and upper body, and she was directly beneath Tom. I screamed and stumbled backward. Tom grabbed my arm, but I pulled away and told him there was a woman under the bridge. He looked through the gap, then turned towards me. "There's no one there," he snapped. "You're ridiculous." I gestured for him to get out of the way while I looked through the gap again, and just like I said, there she was. Her body faced me, but her head was locked to my right, exactly where Tom was standing. Most of her features were hidden beneath her wet hair, but I could see one wide, unblinking eye. And then her mouth moved while she said the words, "I should have left you." Tom's expression changed immediately. Before either of us could say anything, something slammed into the underside of the bridge. Tom grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the end. The woman continued to crawl beneath us. Her footsteps struck the underside of the planks in rapid, uneven bursts, keeping pace as we ran. Each lamp went dark just before we reached it, then flickered back on behind us. Halfway to the end, something slammed into the bridge beneath my feet, and fingers appeared through the gap beside my shoe. They curled around the edge of the plank as though the woman was trying to pull herself through. Tom turned back and stomped on the hand, which then disappeared. We reached the other side of the bridge and ran until we were several streets away. The footsteps didn't follow us beyond the river. Once we were inside our room, Tom and I tried to make sense of what we experienced, but neither of us had a good answer. We were also still mad at each other, so we weren't really speaking. I stayed in the bedroom while Tom stayed in the living room. A couple of hours later, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard Tom's voice from the bathroom. He said, "You ruin everything." I got up and pushed the bathroom door open, ready to confront him, but Tom wasn't there. I went out to the living room where he was lying on the couch watching TV. As soon as I walked in, he asked me for how long I've wanted a divorce. I asked him what he was talking about. He said he had just heard me say I wanted a divorce. I told him I didn't say that, but I did hear what he said from the bathroom. Tom claimed that he was never in the bathroom. We spent the rest of the evening accusing each other of saying things that neither of us remembered. Eventually, I went to sleep in the bedroom. Sometime in the middle of the night, I abruptly shot awake and sat straight up. As I was catching my breath, I looked around the room and noticed something in the mirror across from me. The woman from the bridge was sitting next to me, but only in the reflection. As terrified as I was, I couldn't move. I sat there frozen, staring at her in the mirror for who knows how long, until I heard her whisper, "You should have left him." Then I watched as the mirror fogged over. It was so thick that I could no longer see our reflections. It was only there for a few minutes, and after it was gone, so was the woman. Sometime before dawn, I must have drifted off because I woke to the front door closing. I went out and saw that Tom was gone. Somehow, I knew where he had gone before I even left the room. The streets were empty and covered in a thin mist. I followed the river until I saw the bridge ahead. Only one lamp was still burning, and Tom was beneath it. He leaned over the railing, staring down at the water. I called his name, but he didn't answer. As I stepped onto the bridge, I heard a voice from beneath the bridge calling out to Tom. He lifted one leg onto the lower rail. I ran toward him, and once I got close, I saw the woman was directly beneath him, crawling upside down along the bridge supports. For the first time, I could see most of her face, and she smiled when she saw me. Then she spoke. I never stopped the affair. Then she turned to Tom and said, "I haven't loved you in a long time." Tom climbed higher onto the railing. I grabbed the back of his coat and pulled with all my strength. The woman slammed both hands against the underside of the bridge, pushing her gray fingers through the gaps around our feet. As we ran, the woman followed beneath us until we reached the end of the bridge. We returned to the Airbnb, packed our things, and left as soon as transportation began running that morning. Although the voices stopped after we left town, the damage to our relationship remained. Tom eventually admitted that he'd never stopped the affair. I admitted that I had met with a divorce attorney 2 months prior to our trip. We separated a few months later and eventually divorced. For a long time, I blamed the woman under the bridge. I thought about how she twisted our words, turned us against each other, and destroyed a relationship that was salvageable. But as time passed, I realized the woman wasn't the problem. She may have changed what we heard, but she didn't create the resentment we held. She only brought it to light. I mean, I feel like the woman's doing a public service. Now imagine if they monetized this bridge so that couples could just go ahead and cross over, figure out if their relationship is going to work before they waste too much time. Go ahead and tell me where the bridge is and I'll make this happen. Would you be brave enough to cross that bridge? Let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for spending the night with me. If you love spooky stories, be sure to follow for more Midnight Confessions.
Why is it that the sun looks like an LED light now? And why is it that all of the sudden, when we switched to LED bulbs, the sun started to look more and more like an LED light? Because I remember the sun being that yellow orangish hue. Remember, we used to call it the golden sunlight. It was amazing. It was beautiful. And then all of a sudden it changed. And it's like, why did we switch to these LED bulbs? We were told they were cheaper and they were brighter and we could see better. But I don't know anybody that saved money on their utility bill because of these lights. I don't know anybody that can see better because of these lights. They look brighter, but they're actually very dim. Now, I started to think about it more. I remember something my grandma used to do. And at the time, I didn't realize what she was doing. But she did not like LED lights. She wanted to keep the original orangish, yellowish hue incandescent bulbs in her home. She would not switch to LED. And for some reason, she was afraid of it. Now, my grandma was this very spiritual person who was very much aware of what was going to happen in the future. So she was always being prepared. And I really think that she knew something about these LED bulbs that most people didn't. That there was something dark and sinister to it. And then I started to think more about it. Wait a second. When they switched to these LED bulbs, I started having problems with my eyes. I had 20/20 vision, but now I have to wear glasses to see all the time. The light outside, the light inside, right, it hurts my eyes. I do not like these LED bulbs. It makes it hard to drive at night. It makes it hard to see. I also noticed I started getting anxiety from these lights. I started feeling sick all the time. And I'm not the only person. I'm sure there are so many people who describe the exact same thing that happened when we changed out these bulbs. And when you look, right, all throughout history, all throughout different cultures and religions, right, one of the things they always talk about is the eye. The eye is always this important thing. So think about it. If this light was damaging our eye, it would prevent us from seeing what was going on. So what if these LED lights, what if all of these changes are to allow something dark, something evil, something sinister to walk among us without us being able to see it? I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you like these new LED lights, or do you think there's something more to them?
Want to start streaming today? Tap the Go Live link below to test it now.
For 3 weeks, the same woman parked outside of my house, and at first I thought that she was waiting for somebody, but I realized that she was waiting for me. I moved into this neighborhood a few years back, and everything was fine for a while, and then I started to notice a silver SUV parked across the street from my house. And obviously I didn't think too much of it at first. I just figured like she was there for one of the neighbors. But then night after night, I started to notice that it was the same person being parked outside. So I started to watch, and I would look outside of my window, and it was always the same lady, and she would just sit there. She would sit there for 20, 30 minutes. She never got out, and then she would drive away. Started to think maybe she just lived nearby. I don't know. I was trying to think of any excuse as to why this lady would be here. Until one night I came home from work a little bit later, and I got out of my car and I started to walk towards my door, and I just kind of looked over at her and she was staring. So I looked away, and then I looked back again right before I went to my front door, and she was still staring at me. I think my last straw was when I came home the next day that she was actually parked right across from my driveway this time. And I actually brought it up to my neighbor, and they said, oh, like I thought that this was one of your friends. And I said, no, I've never seen this woman in my life. And so the next day I decided to change up my routine. Instead of coming home right after work, I decided to go to the grocery store. When I came walking out of the store, I saw the same SUV across the parking lot. I didn't get close enough to see the face, but I know the vehicle, and I know that it was this lady. And so afterwards, I drove to my sister's house instead of going home, and I didn't see her follow me. So I just convinced myself maybe I was just being paranoid until the next morning. As I walked out to my car to go to work, I noticed that there was a little piece of paper underneath my little wipers. And in it said, you weren't home last night.
Immediately, I called the police, and the police came and they looked at the note. They wrote down the license plate that I had given them, and they told me that the lady who owned the car lived 40 minutes away. Eventually, the officers actually asked me if I worked at a hospital, a specific hospital, and I said no, but my sister did like several years ago. And apparently we have a tie to this lady who's been stalking my house. She knew somebody that was staying in that hospital that my sister worked at. And I guess she tied together a situation that happened with somebody that she loved where my sister was involved. I had nothing to do with it. I'm not sure how much involvement my sister had in whatever happened to their loved one, but obviously she tracked us down and she found my address. The police contacted her and told her to stay away from me, and I didn't have any issues for 6 months or really any issues up to this day, but I will say there was one day when I was driving and I stopped at a red light and I looked over and it was the same silver SUV, and I looked at the driver and it was the same lady and we made eye contact. She didn't follow me. However, it did make me wonder how long she was watching me before I noticed that she was watching me. If you have any scary stories or unexplainable stories, feel free to send them into the link in my bio. My hotline is always open.
I think I met a vampire. Help. One of my followers, he did not get back to me on whether he wants to remain anonymous or not, so we're going to call him T. Sent this story in, and you guys gotta let me know what you think. T says that he goes to college near Springfield, Massachusetts. He was walking in the city kinda late, maybe around like 11 p.m. Okay, so he cuts through a side street when this guy steps out of the alley, literally licking his lips. He describes him as a white dude, about 6 feet tall, maybe in his late 20s, but the way he was dressed was just off. He said almost like 80s attire, kind of outdated, but not in like a hipster way, just old. So T says the reason he says he was dressed like he was from the 80s wasn't just the denim jacket and the weird hairstyle. It was the Walkman he was holding. He said, I didn't even know what it was called until my friend showed me a picture, and now I feel really old. T says he had one of those old school headphones attached to it, you know, the kind with that thin metal band. He was also wearing aviator sunglasses, and he had this confident strut about him. And now here's the really gross part. He said he smelled like BLOOD. Sorry guys, I get flagged for saying certain things on here. Gotta stay safe. And he goes, it wasn't just an iron smell, but a coppery, slightly sweet scent. You know, like liver. And T said, as far as he could tell in the dark, he did not have any visible wounds. Okay, so this guy spots T, and then he made a beeline for him and asked him for direction. The second he got close, T says, I swear to God, he smelled like BLOOD. He said it was dark, so he couldn't see what he was drinking, but he was definitely holding something. Maybe like a bottle, a cup, something. He says, I remember fixating on his canines. See, they weren't long, but they were sharp, like noticeably sharp. And it just keeps getting weirder. So then he asks T where the nearest payphone was. And T says, I told him I had no idea because who the hell uses a payphone in 2025? That's back when this happened. So T says that this guy had an accent and it sounded like a European one. But at first, when he approached T, he was speaking, or he tried to speak Tagalog, which, excuse me if I am not saying that correctly. T is Filipino, but he only speaks English. So this man approaching him made an assumption and tried to speak to him in that language at first. And T said he laughed a little because he was like, wait, you just assumed? But like now he's thinking about it, thinking, how did he even know Tagalog? Sorry, you guys, I apologize for the pronunciation. And then he said it got really weird because for a split second, it felt like the air got sucked out of the street. Like everything just stopped. He said there was no wind, no distant car sounds, nothing, just silence. And he turned his head just for half a second, maybe just half a second instinctively. And when he looked back, this guy was gone, you guys. Not walking away, not turning a corner, completely gone. And T says, I know he was real because when he first walked toward me, he kicked a rock and I heard it and it skid across the pavement. And I even checked, yes, that rock was there. So T says, so yeah, either I met a vampire or something like that, or I ran into a guy on substances. And then he goes, or maybe he was part of some weird counterculture scene. Who knows? But he says, I still can't figure out how they knew Tagalog. And my parents speak it, so I recognize it, but I never speak it myself. And also, the way everything just sort of froze is just too weird. T says, again, I might just be crazy, or maybe he might just be crazy, but still. So T wants to know, has anyone experienced anything similar? What are your thoughts, guys? This one is extremely intriguing to me. Let me and T know down in the comments, and if you have a creepy or vampire-y story of your own, please submit it. If you're new here, please follow for more creepy story time.
Let's read a true, scary story. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a plushie and get cozy. I'm from a small town and this happened around 2001 to 2002 when I was a kid. Now I'm a 29-year-old man. In front of our house, there was a huge open field where all of us used to play. We'd play cricket, football, anything. At the far end of that field, there was a boundary wall. Beyond that wall, things got different. Behind it were 3 mountains. The middle one was smaller, and then the 2 on the other side were massive. At the base of those hills was a thick jungle. Tall trees, bushes, plants, and many huge mango trees. It was dense, quiet, and honestly a bit frightening. We usually avoided going there. Still, during the summer, people would go to collect mangoes. Some even went deeper into the hills to gather firewood. One incident made that place even more disturbing for me. One day, a cow somehow got electrocuted near that area with high voltage electric line. It passed right there. People gathered to look, but no one removed the body. After a couple of days, vultures came, then dogs. I still remember the smell in the air and the way the body turned a deep reddish color during sunset. It didn't look like a cow anymore. It looked wrong. That place started feeling different after that. Quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. But kids are curious. Me and my siblings went there once out of curiosity. A week or 2 later, me and my brother and 2 friends decided to go collect mangoes. We avoided the path, the one near the dead cow, and took another route. Narrow, overgrown, and darker. The kind of path where even your own footsteps sound too loud. As we got close to the mango trees, we saw her. A woman in a white dress, standing near the mango trees. Her back was towards us. She was maybe around 40 to 50 years old. She started walking slowly in a circle around one tree. Not like a normal person. Each step felt delayed, like her body was following something that wasn't in sync. Her long hair was completely open. One of my friends grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt. He whispered, almost choking, "Don't move. That's not human. That's not a person. That's a ghost." And ran away without looking back. The rest of us stayed, trying to convince ourselves it was just a normal woman collecting mangoes. Maybe she's just collecting mangoes, I said. Then suddenly, she wasn't there. Then she was again. She appeared and disappeared while moving around the tree. My chest felt tight. One of my friends picked up some stones and threw them toward where she had been standing. The stones landed. She didn't move. She didn't look at us. She didn't react at all. We couldn't see her face clearly, the light was fading, but something about the way she was looking, it didn't feel like she was seeing us. It felt like she already knew we were there. That's when the fear hit us properly. It was getting dark, the sun was almost gone, the whole place felt heavier, like the air had changed. For 1 second we blinked, she was gone again. That was it, we ran. I don't remember deciding to run, our bodies just did. We crashed through the bushes, scratched our legs, and jumped the wall. And we didn't stop until we reached the field. We just ran across the field and told everyone. Of course, no one believed us. When I got home and told my family, my mother scolded me for going there. But my grandmother, she didn't laugh. She went quiet. Then she told me something I wish I never heard. She told me that a few years before, a woman had passed near that exact area. She was working at a construction site, carrying bricks on her head, when an old wall collapsed on her. She passed on that spot. That place was very close to those mango trees. My grandmother told me to never go there again, not in the evening, not alone, not ever. For many years, I didn't. About 10 to 12 years later, I went back with my cousins during the daytime. We picked mangoes, joked, tried to act brave. But even then, I couldn't stay there for much time because some places just hold memories. They hold something that never really left, some things you don't forget, and some places don't forget either. Let me know what you think, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to read, just send me a DM.
A substitute teacher walked into a classroom that wasn't on the school's floor plan. The students knew her name. She had never met them before. Welcome to the Midnight Sesh. We have had some cat 4. Now let's get into the story. Miss Carter was filling in at a high school outside of Portland. Her first day was completely normal until she was sent to room 214. She checked the school map. There was no room 214. She asked the office. The secretary looked confused. We don't have a 214. A few minutes later, another teacher walked by and pointed down the hallway. It's right there. The door had a small sign, 214. Miss Carter opened it. There were about 20 students sitting inside. Every desk was occupied. They were completely silent. She introduced herself. Before she could finish, one student raised his hand. We know. She laughed nervously. Know what? The boy pointed at the whiteboard. Written across it was, "Welcome back, Miss Carter." She hadn't been to the school before. She asked who wrote it. Nobody answered. Then she noticed something else. Every student had a sheet of paper on their desk. Each one had a name at the top. She picked up the closest one. It was hers. Underneath her name were 3 dates. First day, last day, and a blank line underneath. She dropped the paper. The bell rang. Every student stood up at once. Miss Carter told them they couldn't leave yet. The students stared at her. Then the boy whispered, "We have to go before you remember." The classroom emptied. Miss Carter ran into the hallway, but there was no hallway. She was standing in the school's main entrance. She found the principal and told him what happened. He looked at her strangely, then asked, "What classroom?" She said 214. The principal went pale. He pulled out an old yearbook. There was a photograph of room 214. The picture was taken 20 years earlier. The room looked exactly the same. Miss Carter stared at the photograph. The principal whispered, "That class disappeared in 2004. Nobody was ever found. The school had sealed the room afterward." Miss Carter asked why she had been able to enter it. The principal didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the yearbook again. There was now a new photograph, taken that morning. Miss Carter was standing at the front of the classroom, and written on the board was, "Welcome back." The principal looked at her, then asked, "Did they tell you when your last day is?" Miss Carter looked down. The paper was still in her hand. The blank line underneath, "Last day," was no longer empty. It had today's date. So wait, I don't get why she was able to enter the room. And why is the principal being so fucking sus? Like, bitch, say it, spit it out. She already had the picture taken in there. She already has the date. It's done and sealed. Let me know your thoughts down below. Go ahead and like, follow, comment, and share. I love you as always. Bye.
Bro, what's going on around?
I will never use a Ouija board again. Hi everyone, welcome back to Candlelit Whispers with Amanda. Today we have an interesting Reddit story about someone who used the Ouija board and had an unsettling experience. The first and only time I used a Ouija board, I was a teenager. I was sitting on the back porch with a friend, and honestly we were just messing around. I didn't really believe any of it. We started asking random questions, mostly just laughing wherever the planchette moved. I remember this old photograph I'd seen in my house. There was a woman in my family who was called Aunt Neil. The name Neil stuck with me because it was a boy's name. So I try to talk to my great Aunt Neil, but when I speak, I say without hesitation or control, Aunt Connie. And I thought that's weird. I don't have an Aunt Connie. So I said it again. I'm trying to speak with, and mentally saying the word Neil, I said Connie. It was an involuntary response, very weird, but we moved on and kept playing. When my mom got home from running errands, she asked how our game was going, and I replied, except I keep trying to talk to Great Aunt Neil, but kept saying Connie, which is so weird because I don't have an Aunt Connie. I still remember my mom's face in that moment. It turns out I did have an Aunt Connie. She was a baby who died of SIDS decades before I was born. My mom almost named me after her. I went on to have extreme paranormal experiences that continue to this day, actually. I think it opened a door that I haven't been able to close. The scariest things that ever happened to me were from when I was moody 15 to 18-year-old girl that seemed to really energize my surrounding, and lots of scary things happened. I saw people, heard my name whispered in my ears multiple times, heard footsteps, and heard a voice mimic my father's and try to walk around the kitchen. That one convinced me that we were broken into, and I stayed outside until my boyfriend came to get me. Of course, no one was there. Wow, seems like she has a lot of paranormal things happening in her life. I'm curious if she's just naturally in tune to those types of things. So, of course, the Ouija board had a way to communicate with her. But if you have a scary Ouija board experience, feel free to leave it in the comments below.